I've been very fortunate to raise two well-rounded children. My oldest son is currently studying in Colombia, and my youngest, he made an astounding 6 figures before he even turned 18. I know that sounds crazy, trust me, we had to file his taxes. So in this video, I want to share with you some of my parenting philosophies and reflections to help you raise independent and successful children. Now, whether you're a parent, a soon-to-be parent, or maybe someone who needed a little bit more from their parents, I'm excited to have this heart-to-heart just between you and me. And feel free to just listen if you're doing something else right now, as this is going to be a laid-back conversation together. I came across a yogi, his name is Sadhguru, and he said something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing here, that children are born into the world completely perfect. It's all the intervention and actions of adults, mostly parents, that ruin their child. So I'm not that different than how many first-generation immigrants are raised by parents, especially in the time in which we came to the United States in the 70s, where we had two parents that were both working. So this is the dual income household. They were at their job from sunrise to sunset, basically. And when we would come home, we were latchkey kids. We'd take care of ourselves until our parents got home. Now, reflecting back on my formative years, I just thought this thing that I so longed for, more entertainment choices, more present parents, actually really helped me to develop as a human being. My parents just kind of let us do whatever we want. They had certain ideas and rules, but they didn't come down on it with like an iron fist and say, you must do this. They wanted us to do well in school, but it wasn't like, you're disappointing the whole family, I'm so ashamed of you. It wasn't any of that kind of stuff. So this laissez-faire style of management in terms of raising us allowed me to dream, to daydream, and it allowed my creative child to survive into adulthood. So I was never told you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, or this isn't correct, you should be doing something else. They might have felt it, but they didn't explicitly say it. So I was thinking, man, now that I'm an adult and an entrepreneur and very comfortable with taking risk, I'm wondering how I can create an environment for my own children, though not having the same needs and wants that I had growing up relatively poor and lower income. How do I create that same idea? And so my parenting style is really around having really healthy guardrails, but a wide berth for them to explore in between. So I have very firm rules for the things that matter to me and almost no rules in between. And you might be sitting there thinking, well, what are the rules and how many there are? How many are there? There's exactly 2 rules that I can think of right now. Number 1 is always give people respect first. Respect is a very important thing for me. So when you disrespect me or disrespect friends or teachers or parents, that is not a good sign of a person who understands their place in the world. So give people respect until they give you a reason not to respect them. And rule number 2, 0 tolerance for physical violence towards each other. We maintain those 2 rules, and that seemed to work really well. Now, this is a direct contrast to how most parents raise their children. There's a term, it's called helicopter parenting, where you kind of, I think the way it sounds is like you hover over your kids, you're kind of micromanaging every little thing that they do. And the classic example of this is you go to a playground and you see a parent looking after their children, like every little thing, like make sure you don't get a splinter, wipe your hands, and literally taking them up to the top of the slide and then letting them slide down, but running down as fast as possible to catch them on the way down. I don't have that kind of energy. But I also think, what do we want to do when we're doing this helicopter style parenting? I think we're trying to safeguard our kids from getting hurt. That's generally a good thing. But what we're also doing is we're preventing them from experiencing small mistakes and learning that mistakes, little bumps and bruises, both metaphorically and literally, are what life is about. And I didn't want my children to experience setbacks and mistakes and failures, those bumps and bruises, into their adulthood. They should be experiencing this and normalizing this as part of how we grow. So that our desire to protect our children actually prevent them from making good decisions later on. I was at a workshop or a seminar from a doctor who was like psychologist. And he was talking about this thing. It's like, what is parenting about? Parenting is when you download your operating system to the little human, and when you're not around, the little human operates with the same set of instructions without you there. So this over-parenting, this need to control, means they will do what you want when you're around. The real question is, what will they do when you're not around? That's the true test. And they said there's something that we need to recognize, the strong-willed child, the one who is not easy to mold and tell what to do. And they said, please protect that strong will of that child. Because what parents want to do is they want to break the will of the child like they're a wild animal to be tamed. And they said they will need that strong will, that conviction, that North Star that they have internally, when people are telling them to do things that they know are not right. So we've heard of like negative influence, like say they want them to commit a crime, cheat on a test, or to be mean to other kids, or to steal, to do drugs, whatever it is. It's very hard to stand up to a group of your peers. That strong will that exists inside of them, if you break that as a parent, you'll also break it when they need to use it when you're not around. So for me, it's about being able to share points of view, ways of thinking, but allowing the children to play, to explore like how the world works, and allow them to make their own mistakes. Because your desire to prevent those mistakes are going to create much bigger problems later on. I've been very fortunate in my life and to be privileged enough to be in communities where all my neighbors are affluent. They're upper class, upper middle class, or really just stupid rich. And I get to see how they parent their own children. And when my kids have a play date or they're around their other friends and I get to see how they operate, quite a few of them, a disproportion of them, are really, in my opinion, poorly behaved. They seem to have no boundaries and they'll do whatever they want. And it seems like they're the parent and the parent is the child. So they're really driving the relationship. They don't seem to be very grateful. They speak in commanding language versus asking for permission to do things. And I see just like a super unhealthy level of, or lack of respect. Like I'm Mr. Doe. I'm not Chris. Don't call me Chris. Okay, you don't earn that right until I give you that permission. I know it might be like that way at your house where you can call dad Bob and mom Sarah. Maybe that's the way it works, but I'm old school like that. And the other thing that I see is that their ability to delay gratification is very finite. So when they don't get what they want, they start to go into turbo temper mode. And they seem to ask for things as if the world owes them something. Here's a classic example. We sometimes travel with other parents, and obviously if we're traveling, we're vacationing together, and they're pretty affluent. And I remember one time we're all being served our food, it's good food, everything, and they just eat the part that they want, and they're like, I want another one. And I was like, oh my God, how are we going to handle this situation? And then the parent raises their hand, motions to the flight attendant and says, can we have another one? And they're like, of course. So they get another one and they rip it right open. They basically just eat one component of the entire meal. And now they're like, I want another one. I was like, there's got to be some boundaries around this. I understand the need to feed your children, but to say like the tone, the attitude, and the way you're doing this and your lack of being grateful and appreciative of what you're having, it's just driving me crazy. I see in many other situations, kids can't make decisions. Basic things like, do you want vanilla or chocolate? And they start to like have a total meltdown because it's either or the parent says, well, you have it all. And then they do this where they just compensate the inability to make a decision with just spending more money and being super wasteful. So the feelings of anxiety, indecisiveness, overthinking seems very apparent to me. And the lack of clear boundaries, both from the parent and the child, is going to manifest itself later on. What happens to these kids is there's a couple different things that I've seen manifest. Number one is they wind up being self-absorbed, egotistical, self-important people. But you would think, okay, well, that's not so bad. I mean, but what happens is when you go into the real world and everyone else isn't trained to accommodate you and appease you, you become isolated. You become the pariah of a community. And so they wind up not having great friends and people alienating them, people making fun of them. And so they have a lot of social interaction, social cue, like they don't know how to read what's going on because everywhere they've been thus far from the parents or the grandparents who lack boundaries and parenting skills have given them exactly what they've wanted. They've always been the most important person in the room. And you can't blame them for that because if I grew up in an environment for 20 years of my life or 18 years of my life where everyone just gave me whatever I wanted and I got more of what I wanted without any restrictions or any penalties, why wouldn't I expect the entire world to do that? That's a pattern in life that was established for them. So I think when we look at adults now, people who are in the public light, who don't know how to handle their fame, their power, their influence, their wealth, we see that kind of bad behavior. And I can't help but to conjecture that I think there was a lack of boundaries somewhere along the way, that someone didn't sit them down and say, hey, chill out. Let me give you all an example, okay? My hot button issue is around respect. So if I'm traveling with someone, we're going to a museum or some science fair or something, I get to spend quite a bit of time with children and their parents, and I see the child running roughshod over their parents and I want this, I don't want to do this anymore. And at some point, my inner thermometer just reaches boiling point. I'm like, I can't take this anymore. And I shouldn't have to be the parent, but I'll go over to the child. I'll get down at their level and it's like, I don't know if you know this, but I'm going to say this on behalf of your mom and dad, but they worked really hard to provide you what you have, the things that you get to enjoy. And the level of disrespect that I'm seeing is really hard for me to witness. I just wanted to let you know that this is my observation. And I would encourage you to try to be a little bit more grateful and to mind your manners. And I'm thinking, okay, I had to do this. I feel really not angry at them, but I feel really angry at the parent. And the typical response that I've gotten is, see, Johnny, see, Mary? That's how Uncle Chris raises his kids. And I'm like, well, where are you in this? Are you neutered in this operation? Don't you have authority and power to do something about this? So you're going to abdicate your responsibilities and export that to someone else, somebody like myself. And then you can see the kids, their reaction to this, they tighten up, they become really quiet. They've never been spoken to like this before. And we get in the car and all of a sudden it's like they're scared of me. And it's quite interesting because I have no power over them. I can't punish them, nor do I want to. But no one has ever spoken to them like that before. And it's a shock to their system. Now, what happened with my own children is they would say, Dad, I can't believe you said that to them. And now no one wants to come over and play at our house. I'm like, that's good. Until they learn respect and boundaries and to be grateful, I don't really want them here. They're not that welcome. I'm sorry. And then my kids get upset at me. It's like, oh, now we have no friends and everything. And for a little while, my own kids had some resentment and anger towards me for being the disciplinarian that I am. Like I told you before, I have two hot buttons, right? One is around respect and the other one is around physical violence towards each other. So this is them crossing that boundary, and I'm going to lay it. Like, I don't do it the first infraction. I do it when I'm like, I can't handle this anymore. There's too much of this happening and I have to just put a stop to this. I can't be around them and I don't want to explode in anger. So fast forward a couple of years when my kids are older and understand what's going on and they're around people like this, they turn to me like, oh my God, that's a mess. And I can't stand them either. And then without directly apologizing to me, they say, Dad, I'm just glad you raised us the right way. And so here's one lesson for all you parents. Like, I'm not trying to win the battle. I'm trying to win the war. So a lot of parents manage their own kids because they want to appease them and make them happy and feel like the kids love them and like them and respect them. I will forego the temporary loss of a battle to win the entire war. And the war is, I want to make sure that my children, when they're adults, have a good set of rules and beliefs and values and know how to govern themselves and know how to make decisions and to know that their decisions have consequences. And if it means that they don't like me for most of their life until they get into an age where they're more aware of who they are and they have their own identity, that then they can warm up to me. So I guess it was a couple of years ago when my wife would notice with my oldest son, his attitude towards me started to change because I think for a long period of time, he was not so happy with me. And she goes, it's kind of crazy now. I think your son is falling in love with you. Because now it's always like, Dad is so good at this. Dad is so great. And I know this and I'm good because of Dad. That's what I mean in terms of like playing the long game and making sure you're doing the right thing so you don't appease them in the moment. And the classic example, if your kid wants candy and they have a mouthful of cavities, the easy thing is to give them the candy. It's like, I just want them to be happy. I want to be a good parent. I want them to be happy. This is their child that I want to rock. And after a while, they have no teeth left. So I'm the kind of person who's like, we don't really want to eat candy. And you can have it if you want, but try it and see how you feel about it. And so to this day, my kids don't really look forward to Halloween because they don't have a sweet tooth. They prefer not to eat candy at all. And so those habits, those ways of looking at the world have been set a long time ago. So if they're going to have a soda with sugar in it, it's an occasion. It's not slamming it down 3 times a day with every meal. I don't think I'm saying anything particularly unique or different, but I'm saying in a sequence that maybe if this resonates with you, you'll want to dig in deeper. Number one is, I think our job as parents is to reverse engineer who our children are supposed to be, to allow them space to try lots of different things and not to be too hard on them when they fail or when they want to change their mind. So if my children want to play music, I'm like, let's support that. Let's get lessons. Let's rent the instrument. And if you want to go deeper and deeper, we'll continue on that journey with you. And if you want to stop, we'll let you stop. So it's not something that I want for you. It's like, what do you want for yourself? So as parents, I think instead of trying to hover over them and shape them into the person we should have been or we could have been, living vicariously through them, what we should do is instead is like see what they gravitate towards and allow them to play. So both of my children are very creative, but they express their creativity in very different ways. And so I want to make sure throughout the house we have the resources, tools, and means to support whatever their interests are so they can explore it to whatever degree they want to take it. So my son, we saw that he had great talents and interests was in drawing. So we'd always make sure he has all the art supplies, and we would encourage him, and he wanted to make YouTube videos. So we showed him how. We would set up things for him to make YouTube videos of him drawing, those time-lapse videos. And mom would bribe him a little bit. Every video you post, I'll do something for you, right? And just encourage him to help him set up those kinds of patterns. And it was great. And then he went out of that phase and he stopped. Otto, on the other hand, loves music, and he would play piano nonstop, day and night. And we would just make sure that he has the piano he needs, and he has the tutors and the mentorship that he needs, and encourage him to make music. And so he started to write songs, and I was like, this is wonderful. You could do this for your life if you want to. But he's like, Dad, I don't want to be a musician. It's not important work. And he would have all these reasons. I'm okay. All right. Just want to encourage you. And so they get to explore lots of different things. And I think that's our primary role, is to not try to make up for the mistakes and the missed opportunities that we've had and get our children to do that. You'll notice a lot of times parents who don't have a lot of education want their children to be super educated. Parents who didn't go into government, who have always wanted to do that, encourage the children to do that. Who weren't doctors, lawyers, or attorneys now want their children to do that because they're trying to fix their own life's mistakes. The message I have for parents here is, you had your shot. For whatever reason, let's say your parents weren't as gracious, as giving, and as supportive and nurturing as you'd like them to be, and no parent really is, but you had your shot. Why inflict the same wound to your own children so that they have this repetition of inherited trauma or set of rules? And we'll refer to these rules as dogma. This is the way it's always been done. This is the way it always will be. And what we realize is the times have changed so much, even in my own lifetime, with the advent of the internet, social media, and now with AI, that a lot of the rules that we had just 30, 40, 50 years ago do not even apply anymore. The jobs that people used to do were high paying, or we thought were irreplaceable, are now easily replaced or no longer even exist. What we have to realize is within every generation, the way that technology and opportunities advance is you kind of have to throw out most of the rules, especially when it comes to career. Let's not put all the blame on parents, because you were also raised a certain way, and you were raised to be fearful of the unknown. We would rather lose in a world that we know than to venture forth and have a big win in a world that we don't know. It's the reason why a lot of us stay within a 50-mile radius of where we were raised. It's why many of us haven't ever been on a plane, have never left the state, have never left the country. It's because we want to play it safe. We don't realize that's what's happening, but that's what we're doing. So we want to protect our own children from suffering, from pain. So we're like, well, in my world, this is what works. So let me try to create a new world for you that looks just like my world so that you can navigate it and not have those kind of failures. I'm going to give you one example here. I mentioned before a certain kind of helicopter parenting style. And I'm not often like Mr. Mom with my kids. And every once in a while, my wife has to do something when they're much younger. I think my oldest son at that point was like probably not even 1 yet. And she goes, can you look after him for a little bit? I need to do something. I'm like, cool, but I'm in my work environment. So I put my boy on the couch. He seems pretty stable. He's just sitting there drooling, doing what babies do, being adorable. I kind of look at him, I look away, I look at him, I look away. I go to get a book or something, I get out, and so he's out of my eyesight for like 5 seconds. And then all of a sudden I hear this loud thump. I'm like, oh my God. The boy tumbled off the couch onto concrete floor. Probably head first. So he starts wailing at the top of his lungs. And at this point, we're living in a 3-story house, and my wife's like, what's that? I'm like, oh snap, I failed my one duty as a parent to watch after my kids. My wife comes down and she's like shooing him, kind of like comforting him and everything. He's crying and he's adorable, but he fell on his head. And she gives me just like this scornful look, like, I'll deal with you later kind of thing. And you know what? I was negligent, but I'll tell you something. He never fell off another couch after that. He just didn't. And he would always butt scoot his way down things, and somebody was always there to catch him. I didn't want him to get hurt. I didn't want him to lose an eye or break a limb. But you know what? Sometimes we gotta get a little hurt so we know. Every time I tell you, don't touch the fire, sometimes you gotta get a little burn on you before you realize. Parents today are so fearful of their kids making the wrong decisions, they wind up making all the decisions for them. And this leads to an inability to decide. The classic example, where do you want to eat? It's like, I don't know, you decide. Where do you guys want to go today? I don't know, you decide. To me, that's just like, it boils my blood. Does anybody here have an opinion? As inconsequential as that is. So when I was seeing my family therapist, Dr. Joan Lightfoot, she would say to me, give your children the illusion that they're making decisions all the time. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, don't give them open-ended questions like, where do you want to eat? Say things like, would you prefer to go to the salad bar or the all you can eat pasta place or whatever it is? Just give them 2 options. You guys want Chinese or pizza? And so you've already made the decision. It's going to be one of these 2 things, and neither of them are bad. So when the kids say, I want pizza, I'm like, great. Are we in agreement? Is everybody happy with that? And if we're not, we're going to say this thing, that we can't always be happy, that sometimes we have to compromise to make the whole group happy. So this time you get to pick, next time you get to pick. So we're sharing the responsibility. We're making sure no one feels like their voice is invalidated, but we're not also trying to appease everyone at the exact same time. So we give them the illusion of choice. They make these little decisions, and then what you do is you start to escalate things. And here's something else that my therapist told me about, my family therapist. She said that children feel safe when they know someone's in charge. That rocked my world, because I was like, they feel safe when they know someone who's in charge. And then she would go on to explain, kids who are raised by single parents, oftentimes the parent wants to be their friend. And so when you start calling mom or dad by their first name, that's because we want to be friends. And then the kids start to worry, like, who's in charge right now? If we are equals, who's in charge? And so this starts to create a lot of dysregulation in them. They don't know what's going on, and they do not feel safe. And so I'm that kind of parent. Around certain things, I'm very authoritarian. Things where they can get hurt real bad. So here's what she told me how to handle situations like this. So when we're out and about and we're in a parking lot or a parking structure, I always tell the kids, come here. And they know when dad uses the dad voice, they just come. And I reach out my hand, I hold both their hands, and we walk together. Because you've seen these videos where the kid runs away and gets smacked, gets run over, or bad things happen, right? And so my therapist said, just add this one thing. The next time you're out and you pull them to you and you see danger, what you do is bend down, pick both of them up, hold them in your arms, and show them your vantage point. So from their level, they cannot see that someone was getting in their car and about to start it up. From my level, as I'm scanning around the lot, I can see many more things than them. And I said, and I picked them up. I did exactly as I was told because I'm a good student. I said, see that person over there? I bet you couldn't have seen that down there. And so when you walk over there, because you're below what they can see, unless they have a backup camera, they're going to run right over you. And my kid's like, oh. I do that because I need to demonstrate to them why you need to listen to dad. So oftentimes, if it's an open lot, they run around and all I have to do is say, boys, I do that. And they just come right to me and we're good. And so my wife, who struggles with this too, because she's not applying the same rules. And so they kind of run around and she's like, boys. And no one seems to understand that she's in control. And this manifests itself in some ways. And it's a point of frustration as two parents. Are like, why do they listen to you? Why don't they listen to me? And I'll tell you why. Because you're giving too many instructions all the time. So when there's one that's important, they think it's all the same, that it's not important. Whereas I rarely give instructions. So when I give one, they know it's got to be important. And I've proven it to them using the parenting coaching that I have received and applying it consistently. So I'll give you an example. We're out in Utah. I think it's called Angel's Landing or Angel's Crest. It's actually quite dangerous to get out there. There's a part here where you kind of shimmy along a very shallow ledge and you hold on to a chain that's been bolted to a giant rock. So essentially, if you lose your footing, you have to hold on to that chain because you're going to slide down hundreds of feet and they're not going to find you. And every year, some people die. My kids are fairly young at this point, but we love hiking and backpacking. So my wife and my oldest go together, and my youngest, he must have been like 8, we go together. At some point, they're shimmying their way across and they get really scared. And so they now need to turn around because my oldest is panicking, right? I think he's panicking for good reason. And probably my wife is also a little scared, like, what do we do here? So they're trying to go backwards. Now there's more people going forward and it's a 1-lane kind of freeway here. And so they have to shimmy above and below. And Matthias and I, we make it across. And we look at mom and my oldest and it's like, okay, we're going to go to the top. And I'll tell you why my youngest, who's much more scared than my oldest, the reason why he was able to make it was because he was borrowing on my confidence and he knows who's in charge and he feels safe. And so we wind up going all the way up the ridge and to the top and we would dangle our feet over and take pictures. And I would say to him, son, here's the deal. There's real danger here. If you are not paying attention, but I got you the whole time. If you're not paying attention, you can slip and you fall. There's nothing I can do. The chances of you surviving this fall are very low. And I cannot go home to mom and say I've lost my child. So it's very important for me right now that you follow everything I tell you to do without question. Do you understand? He goes, yes, Dad. And I said, are you scared? He's like, no, I'm not. And so we had this core memory together, being able to do this thing and coming back like an hour and a half later when it's nearly dark. My wife's like, you guys went to the top? I'm like, yeah, we did. Are you okay? I'm like, we are totally okay. And to this day, whenever there's danger, both those boys, unspoken, just start to hover closer to me because they know someone's in charge. So if you want your children to pay attention to what you're saying, just be more diligent about when you want them to pay attention, because otherwise it's overwhelming for them. What we need to do as parents is to make a list of things that are non-negotiable, and they should not be that many things. It should be less than what you have in one hand, like less than 5 things that are non-negotiable. And then I say everything else, just let it go. Your need to control and dictate how things work rob your children of their own decision-making powers. Rob them the ability to make mistakes when it's fairly inconsequential when they screw up, as opposed to like later on in life when they're like investing in some swampland somewhere and they lose all of their money. And I've seen this happen in a lot of different ways. I've been around people who have young children and I kind of see the children running around like wild animals. I'm sorry to describe it like that. I know it's very offensive for some parents to hear that. But like, I have friends that when they're talking on the phone, their kids run over like, what are you doing? What's going on? And trying to grab the phone out of their hand. I'm like, in what world is this okay? But I'm not going to say anything. It's not my job to raise your children, right? Or when one of these children spills milk or does something very typical of what children do, the parents rain down freaking hellfire on them. And I'm like, over that? So we're getting really upset over things that don't matter. And then we're not getting upset over things that really do matter. So the expression I use is we're being hard when we need to be soft, and we're soft when we need to be hard. It's because we don't have our own internal rules. We've never sat down to say, what are my non-negotiables? And this is not just about the parent-child relationship, but this is the partner-to-partner relationship, the employee-to-employer, or vice versa. We don't know what the non-negotiables are. And so we live in a world of gray. And it's hard to navigate because we don't know how to decide, and that creates a lot of anxiety for us. So if you make that list and you communicate that to them and say, there's a lot of things you can do, and you're going to make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time too. But here are the 2 or 3 things that I really care about, and I need you to listen to me. And when you break those rules, there are consequences. And if you set this up and they do break those rules, there have to be consequences. Because children are tricky. They're tricky people. They will say, like, if you draw the line and you say you cross this line, bad things will happen. They'll inch their foot closer and closer to that line. And then you move the line. They'll inch it. And then eventually, like, there is no line. So you do have to follow through. So another warning is don't make empty threats. You have to be able to follow through. Therefore, don't make a lot of threats. Because you're not going to follow through. You're just not going to follow through with them. And they're going to learn sometimes mom and dad is serious, but most of the times they're full of BS. But maybe that's okay within this environment. But when they get into the real world, they're going to assume everybody operates under the same thing, right? And this gets into a lot of problems. For example, people who cross the line in dating environments were like, no, I didn't think you were serious then. We can see this, like, where they learn this pattern from. When you are not being serious, they're like, well, my teacher's not being serious. My boss is not that serious. I know they're just joking because there are no consequences to anything. My whole thing is, I will feel if I failed as a human being if my children go on and start to behave in ways that violate our core values. I've completely failed. I've also made sure that they understand this idea that whatever decisions they make in life are theirs to own and to reap the rewards and suffer the consequences. I'll tell you a little story here. One time, my children and I, we went with my wife too, we love to go to the art store, Blick's art store. We love going there because it's a world of possibilities. Every little thing that you can buy there can be something, can be turned into something, a work of art, something. And we go outside, and there's a homeless lady kind of laying on the street, quite laying on the floor, face up, but laying on the floor. And her hand was peeking past her blanket, open. My assumption was this was her form of asking for money without harassing anybody. So I reach in my pocket, I find some money, and I reach over and place in her hand. And she's like shocked. She's, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. She's kind of yelling at me. Now, she's probably having some kind of like mental illness, and I interrupted what she was doing, and she just was shocked. So we walk away, and my children are so scared, and they kind of run towards the wall, using us as a shield, which they've been trained to do. And they're kind of panicking. My youngest is like, Dad, why didn't she take the money? Why'd she behave like that? And I had to say to him, son, this is my fault. She didn't ask for money. I made the assumption that she wanted money and I wanted to help her, but what I was doing was not helpful to her at all. And he says to me, so people want to be homeless? I said, some do, but many people have some mental illness and they're not quite sure what's going on right now. I wanted to teach him that lesson. Like, we made the assumption it is my fault. Her reaction, pretty normal. Because I said people also have self-respect. They weren't asking for money, and you treated them like they're a charity case, and some people have some problems with that. And I say that could be an explanation. Lots of different things. Maybe she was in a deep sleep and I interrupted her and she felt unsafe and she was responding. Lots of different reasons. All I know is I shouldn't have done that because she didn't ask me. We get in the car. He feels safe, and the kind of stress level is going down. He goes, whew, I guess I'm glad I'll never be homeless. And I turn to him, I say, why wouldn't you be? He goes, what do you mean? I'll just run your business. I said, that's a big assumption that you can run my business and that I've offered it to you, which I've not. a lot of people make poor decisions in their life that could lead them to homelessness. And that's an option for you too, if you want to. And sometimes my wife looks at me like, would you really let them be homeless? They need to believe that. I'm not sure if I would, but they need to believe that, because I don't want them to use this as some kind of backup plan when they make really bad decisions. I'm going to land the plane, but I'm going to tell 2 stories. I'm 53 years old. I have a cousin who's similar age to me. And he came by the house with he started his family much later with his young child. And he's watching how my kids operate, and he's admiring them for like their initiative, how thoughtful they are, and how well they're doing in both respects. Like my oldest is going to Columbia studying philosophy and writing. My youngest is starting art center and is studying entertainment design. And he asked me this fairly kind of casual question. He says, how'd you get them to do their homework? I sense he's struggling through that himself right now with his own child, right? And I said to him, I've never checked on their homework. I've never even looked at the report card. I could care less if they even go to school. In fact, I've tried to bribe them to drop out of school. And he looked at me like, what kind of hippy-dippy, radical, anarchist style parenting is this? And I said to him, the children have done well. We've been very fortunate. We don't ask to see their homework. We don't even know what they're doing. And we want them to love school for their own reasons, not because we told them to. And if they didn't do well in school, we'd find another school for them. We don't think our children are bad if they don't do well in school. We just think the teachers are not good and the school is not a good fit for them. And so I think he walked away probably more confused than he had clarity, but it's very true. Both my kids do what they want to do in the way that they want because they've been trained or given the freedom to do that exact thing. So every decision, like my son really wanted to get into an Ivy League school. He worked really hard. He didn't get into one initially, and he kept working at it, working his essay, and transferred over to Columbia. And then he felt like he checked off a box. Never in my life did I say, it would be great if you went to an Ivy League school. I could care less. And Matthias, to my surprise, who's the younger of the two, who was, for a good portion of their time growing up, felt like he wasn't learning as fast, not as confident, self-assured, but he's a sleeper. One day we're out about, and Otto asked Matthias some questions like, wait, what is going on here? He goes, Dad, do you know how much money he has? I'm like, he has money? He goes, yeah, he has over $100,000. I'm like, what? I thought he was playing video games, yelling at people like, give me the gun all the time. And what he was doing in between the video game sessions is he was being immersed in the digital age and the digital culture. He started to do digital paintings, and he was commissioned by people who were building different NFT projects, and they would hire him and pay him. And so at some point, he became a savvy trader himself, created his own digital wallet, and traded in different kinds of cryptocurrency, and invested and was actually advising his high school friends what they should be doing. I remember one time we were traveling together, and he was like, Dad, I need to finish this call. And the way he was talking, like it's like a scene out of The Wolf of Wall Street. So when it hits this point, I need you to sell, and you need to get out of that whatever XYZ. He was talking about options and trading. I'm like, who does this kid think he is? And you know, when the market got cold, his friends were in trouble. Because it goes in cycles. It's hot and it's cold, right? And then months later, he's like, whew. I'm like, what's going on? Like, what has a child got to whew about? Like, what is so heavy off your chest today, my boy? He goes, Dad, I finally got them out of the red. They're all okay. I told them all to sell. They sold. I will never do that again. So there's a lot of things to pull away from this. Number one is, if you don't rein your children in so much, and you let them learn at the pace in which they can learn, and let them get involved in the things they want to get involved in, wonderful things can happen. But I love that he had to learn a very important lesson. There's this expression that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So you're giving your friends advice on how to invest, and the market takes a dump. So now you feel responsible, personally responsible, which I love, that you now have to help your friends get out of this hole. So he stayed on it with them so that they can get back into the break even or into the black. Then he said sell, and now I'm no longer going to do that. Now imagine, to tie this together with our conversation, if I was a helicoptering parent, I'm like, what are you doing with crypto? Why are you getting involved in NFTs and all this kind of stuff? That's a world full of scammers, and I want to read the contracts and let's negotiate a better deal. What are they paying you? He could make his own mistakes. This was the little guy that I was worried about, who was afraid of making decisions and afraid of the world, who could not ask at a Tender Greens for a refill for dad. That's the same boy. So I think the hypothesis thus far has proven to be pretty good. I can't say this is universally true for everybody. I just want to share my experience with all of you and hope that you get a different perspective and encourage you to let go of the reins, because everything that you think is so important that it needs to be controlled, that has dire consequences, actually doesn't. Certain kinds of damage is like irreversible, but it's very few and far between what those are. And to remember that what you want to do is to create an autonomous, independent, creative human being who's not afraid of making decisions, because they understand that every decision they make has a benefit and a consequence. Allow them that freedom. Don't try to live vicariously through them and have them fix all of your mistakes. You had your shot. Might not have been a good shot, but you had your shot. Let them have their shot. And especially whatever you do, become much more self-aware about the patterns of behavior that you've inherited, that you hold to be true. Even if you didn't like them, you're still repeating them to this day. You are kind of unconsciously giving to your children this horrible inheritance of unresolved childhood trauma. I think your job as a parent, and I'm sorry to be so preachy on this part, your job as a parent is to stop the generational trauma. Let them live their lives. If this episode resonated with you in any deep way, whether you're the parent or the child who needed a better parent, I have another video I'm going to recommend that is a much deeper dive. It's called What You Believe Becomes Your Reality. It's 35 minutes. It was released in 2019, but I think you're going to love it.